Good evening and welcome to Too Deep, a football podcast breaking down the National Football League like really only we can. That's what's going on here, people. Jeff Chadiha from NFL Network, NFL.com. Eric Eager from Sumer Sports, Sumersports.com. My name is Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. You can catch my radio show at 810WHB.com. Thank you for joining us here tonight. We got a lot of things we want to get to. We're going to try to get to all of these. Are the Bucs in trouble? Beaten soundly at home. Tom Brady. Love on the rocks. The Bucs, I don't know, maybe following suit. Only 3 yards rushing, giving up 417 yards and 41 points. Mike McCarthy, is he actually the NFL Coach of the Year right now? Is Kenny Pickett the answer in Pittsburgh? Speaking of Pittsburgh, is Bill Belichick going the way of Chuck Noll? That is 4 Super Bowls with one quarterback, in Belichick's case, 6. And on his way out after that, Javonte Williams is down in Denver. Are the Broncos out? Does Davante Adams miss Aaron Rodgers? Ravens are blowing big leads like it's nobody's business. First team ever to blow 17-point leads. Rams, are they in big trouble at 2-2? And plus 5 of the top 10 teams in the NFL draft are kind of salty. Who's really for real? Who's impressing the most? And we'll also give you what we're looking for in week 5. Jeff, let's start with the Bucs. Are they in trouble? The defense didn't look like the one that had been giving up 9 points per game in the first 3. Offense had no rushing attack. They had a big turnover early and just couldn't get back into the game. Are you ready to sell on Tom Brady and the Bucs?
I will never sell on Tom Brady. It is very hard to do that. I've tried to do it before in the past, and it's come back to bite me. So I won't go that far with it. But there should be concern there. They got outcoached and they got outplayed in a huge game against a team that has championship aspirations as well. They're banged up. That's a big part of what's happening right now. But even that aspect of it, just the injuries they're having, they've stockpiled so many injured players now that it's hard to think, can all these guys be healthy when it matters? What they have going for them, NFC is fairly mediocre. Their division is clearly not that competitive, even though there are some interesting stories there with the Falcons being one of them. But yeah, I think when you look at the way they got beat and what's happening with Tom Brady, I mean, we talked about this last week with him. Now there's divorce on the table and people are talking about his marriage falling apart. I just think that takes a toll on you. As much of a machine as he's been over the last 20 years, he's still a human being. It's still hard to deal with this stuff. And if you had asked me if that roster was completely healthy and intact start of the year, would they be in the Super Bowl, have a good chance? I would have said yes. Right now, after what happened on Sunday night, the way this thing has been going the last couple of weeks with their injuries and his issues, if they win one playoff game, it would be an accomplishment.
You ready to write him off, Eric? Is this like, hey, trouble at home? He's always been able to focus, and now missing training camp, missing practices, dealing with the, kind of, I don't know. I mean, I'd have to go back to the Moynihan dating days to see how he was playing and how the team did during those days. That would be the last time he had something like this to deal with. Where do you sit on whether or not the Bucs and Tom Brady in particular can overcome this?
I actually think the Bucs are going to be fine. They have a good defense. They have a good running game, as far as maybe not running game against the Chiefs, but they have when healthy, a good offensive line. The wide receivers are getting back. But like, as far as Brady, I think Brady's probably done as far as being that kind of elite passer. I'm not exactly sure, what they're going to be able to do. Because, as Jeff said, the family life is a big thing. He was almost always able to compartmentalize that, and now there's really not any anything he can sort of lean on now that he's been able to lean on before. So I do think it's going to be a problem for him now in an NFC that is particularly weak. Generally speaking, I think that they can do okay. But it's not going to be, the 719 passes, leading the league in touchdown passes, leading the league in yards. I don't think Brady's going to be that good relative to normal, and they're just going to have to deal with that.
Yeah, the thing that, to me, I won't rule him out because, I think the Bucs, could be saying, hey, we took the Chiefs for granted. They played a sloppy game against the Colts. We were feeling pretty good about ourselves. Time to refocus. And maybe what Tom Brady needed was to just get to the end and begin the separation process, the divorcing process, get it all out there, not have it be a thing. And we'll see him rise again like the Phoenix from the ashes, which he's been doing since 2014, first time he was written off. But I do think that this isn't the same team, right? We've talked a lot about it. We're going to get to the Rams a little bit later on, but they're defensively, they're good. They have been banged up. They are getting pieces back. So I'm kind of with Jeff, playoff team. Yeah. Championship team. I don't know. I think that, that's a tough thing to maintain, right? Like Brady was able to do it with the Patriots, but is Todd Bowles Bill Belichick? And Jeff, is this an indictment on Todd Bowles? Is Todd Bowles actually in maybe the worst situation a coach could be in? A team that is expected to challenge for a championship, but in reality, it's getting older, losing some pieces. I mean, it's not the the bed of roses that maybe people thought it was for him.
Yeah, and that's the ironic part of it, is that he was supposed to be handed a team that was ready-made to win a championship and make him look really good. And I think Todd Bowles is a good coach, and I think this team will end up having a winning record. I know we have a resident Bucs fan in the house who's pretty big on them coming around midseason. But yeah, it's very hard to keep winning championships even when you don't have coaching changes. When you do change the voice, when you do change the approach, there's going to be an impact there. And let's face it, this wasn't a team that for the last 10 years has been rolling in the playoffs, having all kinds of success. They got really good really fast when Brady got there. They got really hot in the playoffs a couple of years ago. Last year they had injuries. But to sustain that year in and year out, you see it happen with the Chiefs here in Kansas City, where it's just a few things change and it alters the chemistry. It alters just the vibe, the energy of it. And whether people say it or not, once you win one, you think you have the answers to keep winning. And in reality, it just gets harder because more people are thinking about what they want to do, how their lives are being affected, how much credit they're getting. And the secret sauce in Bill Belichick's system, for 20 years was that he had so many guys in that locker room who were veterans, who'd been around him for a long time, who could echo the same message. And I don't know if, again, I'm not going to sit here and say Bruce Arians is going to be a Hall of Fame coach, but I do think offensively they had a different approach, a different vibe to them. Now they're more of a defensive-minded team, and it felt in that game against Kansas City that they didn't have the answers offensively that they might have had a couple of years ago. Once they got behind, it was just like, hey, we're not running the ball anymore, we're just throwing. And that may be coaching, but I do think when you change coaches, you do change a lot of what is happening culturally in your franchise.
Yeah, I like the term culture. The culture not being there anymore, and I think maybe the culture's not there because Tom Brady's not there all the time. Like that, Allen Iverson, God bless him. We're talking about practice, right? I mean, one of the great lines ever. But coaches are adamant that practice matters. I don't know that it matters as much as they think it matters, but it definitely matters. And I think just having that guy, that presence around your team is big. It's not something you can quantify, Eric, as to, okay, what is having Tom Brady there? But I don't see how, even being the best, like I don't see how everybody buys in. If it ain't important to Tom, why is it important to me? That's got to be a difficult situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And the quarterback is the leader of the team in like every sort of way, right? If the quarterback is having problems at home, then that's going to be an issue. If the quarterback is, it's just one of those things where it's going to be very difficult to lead a football team when you're distracted, because you're playing for all 53 guys, and it's just not easy. When you're, and distractions are one thing, but it's just not, easy to, lift all 53 guys up when, you also have the things behind you. And that's why, Brady has been the singularly best player in the history of the league as far as, winning Super Bowls and all that kind of stuff, because he was able to compartmentalize things so well. Probably not able to here. And that I think is extremely difficult.
Well, and also Soren, you want to jump in, but I would say that when you're talking about quarterbacks who are at the end of their careers winning championships, you look at John Elway and you look at Peyton Manning, what did they have in common? They had another great player there who was transcendent and dominant in the postseason that carried them over the top. And so for John Elway, it was Terrell Davis. For Peyton Manning, it was Von Miller. Do the Bucs have that kind of player? Because it can't just be Brady doing it all by himself anymore. Somebody has to become that player for them to really become that kind of championship caliber team now.
If you were to write a recipe for firing a coach, it would be to 1, work for Jerry Jones, 2, go out in poor fashion the year before, and then 3, have your quarterback go down, your big money quarterback go down early in the season. All of that is what Mike McCarthy lives with every day as the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. All he's done is take a backup quarterback and win. Now sitting at 3-1, he's only 1 game behind the undefeated Eagles. Jeff, is Mike McCarthy the coach of the year right now? Has he saved his job, or has he just set up for a big quarterback controversy when Dak Prescott comes back and loses a tough game?
If I'm picking right now, coach of the year, and there's a lot of good candidates, but if I'm picking an early contender or at the quarter mark or whatever, the 4-game mark, I would put Mike McCarthy top of the list. And I know he's an annual whipping boy. I know people look at him, what happened in Green Bay, what's happened in Dallas with the time management and the penalties and everything else. But this team by now was supposed to have Sean Payton on the private jet rolling in. He was supposed to be packing up his house and leaving town. It was supposed to be all types of plots in the cemetery already established, who was going to go in the ground first. But he has managed to keep this team together. And I know Cooper Rush is going to get a lot of credit for it. I know Micah Parsons is going to get a ton of credit for it, and Dan Quinn and Kellen Moore and Zeke's running the ball better. But you need to have somebody who's going to stabilize and steady the ship when things go bad. And so I don't think there was anybody, certainly not within this group, or anybody in the football watching universe outside of Mike McCarthy's family and maybe some Cowboys fans, really loyalists, who thought they could come through this stretch with 3 straight wins and putting themselves in position to compete in the NFC East. It just wasn't going to happen. So I think Mike McCarthy deserves credit for that, keeping this team together and keeping them focused during a very difficult time.
Eric, I've thrown the numbers at you before. Coming into this season, the head coach with the best winning percentage against the spread, a lot of qualifiers there, right? But against the spread was Mike McCarthy. Of all active NFL head coaches, Mike McCarthy had the best number against the spread. Now, part of that is maybe because people think he's a boob, and so they give him too many points. I don't think the guy's a boob by any stretch of the imagination. I don't know if it's like, listen, I covered college football. I'm in Kansas City, and the Kansas Jayhawks used to have a coach, Mark Mangino, who, probably weighed over 400 pounds. And he took the Kansas Jayhawks to the Orange Bowl, and like 2 years later was fired because the fan base, I think, wouldn't embrace the fact that they had a large, overweight head coach. McCarthy's not that big, but, is that part of it? Why is Mike McCarthy, who's won a championship, never, and Aaron Rodgers, by the way, hasn't won anything, hadn't been back to the Super Bowl since Mike McCarthy left. Why is he the best against the spread? And is this just what we should have expected from Mike McCarthy?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say, I do think that like his demeanor and everything kind of contributes to it. He's not like a happy-go-lucky guy. I can certainly see that being a problem. But for the most part, like I would just say it's, they did underachieve at times, and that, 2000, I don't know, like 2020, they, I think a lot of people thought that they were going to be better. They had the Prescott injury, and they had a lot of issues with respect to, how Dalton played and how the defense played and how like soft they were. Now, to his credit, he brings in Dan Quinn, and Dan Quinn's been marvelous. Talk about, disguising coverages, stunting, having a unique scheme and using Micah Parsons to the best of his ability. That is, he deserves, and I think Kellen Moore has been great too. So like, I don't know. I think McCarthy's a lot better than people give him credit for. But I've sort of always thought that, and I've always been a little annoyed at how Aaron Rodgers acted towards him.
Would you make him the coach of the year right now? Eric, would you make him?
Would I make him coach of the year? No, I would say it's Sirianni right now. And but I mean, shoot, if they win another game, they go into LA and win that game, 6-point underdogs, now 4.5-point underdogs. Like, I think you have to make him the favorite.
Yeah. Listen, it's a pretty impressive job he's done. Like when you look at all the storm that's going on around him. I do love the point about the staff all around being pretty good. And right now the Cowboys are finding a way to win tight games. That's a sign of good coaching. I believe good teams win close games. But yeah, I think McCarthy's proven his wear here pretty well this year without Dak. And listen, having Jerry Jones over your shoulder, that's not easy, man. I mean, doing press conferences, putting information out there. I mean, he's one loss away from everybody firing him again. We've already had it up here a couple of times. I still say, somebody said here, Terry said, still think Peyton's the next Cowboys coach, right? I mean, so does everybody. Then again, Eric keeps talking about the Chargers in Peyton. I think, the NFL is his oyster right now. He's going to have plenty of suitors for it. But I think the job that McCarthy's done, I think he continues to prove that he's a quality football coach. And I'd like to see the guy get a little bit more credit. Don't know that he's one of the greats, but he's won a Super Bowl. That's more than most coaches can say. Have the Pittsburgh Steelers fixed things with Kenny Pickett? Jeff, is this in a year that a lot of people felt like there shouldn't be any quarterback go in the first round? One did. It was Kenny Pickett, and they've turned to him. Does this turn things around, or is this something that should have been done from the get-go, and the whole Mitchell Trubisky thing was a waste of time to begin with?
Well, it shouldn't have been done from the get-go, because what they were hoping was for a redshirt season with Kenny Pickett, and sort of like, it's not the same as Alex Smith and Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City, but hoping for some kind of a bridge here where a young quarterback can learn the game while a veteran quarterback held down the ship for a while. And Mr. Trubisky just played himself out of the job. I mean, that's what it comes down to. They had 2 touchdowns. They've got 2 touchdown passes this season. They are 30th overall in total yards. They have weapons there. I mean, they've got George Pickens. They've got Deontay Johnson. They've got Chase Claypool. They've got Pat Freiermuth. They've got Najee Harris. So they've got a young nucleus that is pretty got some potential to it. And my guess is that, not my guess, what I understand it to be is that Kenny Pickett has just done enough in practice to impress the coaches. And Trubisky's been bad enough to where it's like, look, we got to go with this dude just because he's the future. We're 1-3. Mike Tomlin wanted a spark in the last game and put him in there. The guy threw 13 passes, 3 got intercepted. The other 10 were completed. He ran for a couple scores. What I liked about the way the kid handled his success was that he was getting asked all these questions after the game about how he felt about being on the field and the fan reaction and scoring touchdowns. And he was just like, we lost. Like, I don't really, it's nice to be supported, but we lost the game. Like, I'm not caught up in all this stuff about my first big moment. And so he's got a great mentality about him. But is it going to affect what they're doing there? No, it's not going to happen. I mean, they've got to really – Mike Tomlin has won a lot of games, never had a losing season. This is going to be a time for him to really think about what he wants to do offensively with this team. I say it all the time about the Steelers, and it goes back to what Heinz Ward told me a long time ago. When they are running the football and playing good defense, they do well. When they are trying to throw the football, be wide open, they've got problems. They got to get back to a more physical smash mouth element, and if he can do that with Pickett, that's great, but it ain't going to happen this year.
Let me ask you this, Eric. Here's what I don't get. What were they wanting from Mitchell Trubisky? I mean, I think that's an important part of the equation here because, first of all, if the plan is that Kenny Pickett needs a redshirt season, which isn't he like 24, 25 already? Like, we're not talking about a guy who's and I'll look that up here while we're talking about it. I don't think he's it's not, this isn't Patrick Mahomes who had just turned 21 when he was drafted, if I'm not mistaken. Pickett born June 8th of 1990 or June 6th of 1998. So he's 24 years old right now. So To me, it's like time to go. Like, so age-wise, let's get him out there. He's been around for quite a while. Let's play. If you think he needs a redshirt season, he shouldn't be on the field. Then Mitchell Trubisky is here simply to facilitate the game and get you to the next year. What could possibly have changed? And how does 2 touchdowns and 2 interceptions say to you that he can't be the 16-8 or 17-10 or 12 that he was with the Chicago Bears? Or did you really think Mitchell Trubisky, could anybody, Eric, have thought Mitchell Trubisky was going to turn into a, 28 touchdown, I don't know, Ryan Tannehill type, turnaround in Tennessee?
Well, we don't know that Pittsburgh took Pickett with their original draft pick, right? So they weren't necessarily hot on a quarterback. I think it just ended up being that way. Trubisky was signed, when was he signed? March, right? So like Trubisky might have just been their original plan to begin with, and then they just stuck with it because, Kenny Pickett happened to fall to them, right? Like some of us, were wrong, but talked about how, the Pittsburgh could trade up or all this kind of stuff for a quarterback. And ultimately, I think that they took a quarterback that was kind of the best one of the bunch, but wasn't necessarily somebody that they absolutely had to have, if that makes sense. So to me, I think it was more like, Trubisky wasn't brought in to be a bridge. He was the bridge, like he's a bridge by who he is type of thing. And so I don't think it was like a misstep. It was just life changed for the Steelers, and then they changed their mind maybe a little slower than we would. But that's I guess my answer to that. I don't think Trubisky was signed to be a backup. I think he was signed to be a starter.
I'm finding quarterbacks, developing quarterbacks is hard. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that talk show fat ass has all the answers on the quarterback. I don't. But I know this. You have to have a plan. And I don't see what happened with Trubisky. Number one, I don't see where he's playing really any different than he did with the Bears. So either Matt Nagy didn't do that bad a job, right, in Chicago, or you expected more. You have to have a plan, and I don't know how the plan could have been. First sign of trouble with Trubisky, we're out. We're going to Pickett. And maybe I did not see Pickett play. So 0 touchdowns, 3 INTs. I don't know if one's a Hail Mary and at an end of a half or something, and one he was hit. I don't know what the caliber of the interceptions are. I just see those numbers sitting there. I think, to a fault, like the plan seems to be around the NFL, Jeff, for a lot of these quarterbacks is the Patrick Mahomes plan. They see the success. And I think a lot of teams are thinking that, okay, it's not just talent. It's not just Andy Reid. It was that apprenticeship year. Let's put him behind a veteran and all that. And I don't know. I mean, maybe Andy Reid or Brett Veach or Patrick Mahomes can say, well, it was 20% being behind Alex Smith, and it's 60% his talent, and it's 30% Andy Reid. And I think I just did 110% there. But whatever the breakdown is. But to me, I'll say this. The Chiefs said apprenticeship year. And they had every reason, and I think should have put him into the lineup when they fell to 7-6. They lost 3 straight games and fell to 7-6 and were in danger of missing the playoffs, and they didn't waver. They played him in a final meaningless game that they didn't need at the end of the year. He won, by the way, to take the Chiefs to 10-6, but they were already in the playoffs. And they didn't turn to him in the second half of a playoff game against the Titans where their offense had nothing going. They had a plan, as much as I don't necessarily agree wholeheartedly with it, and they stuck to the damn thing. That's what I don't get. This to me, and it's amazing to me with Mike Tomlin, this is a dart throw. Like, let's see if this works. How could it be anything but?
Well, look, I think Terry McCulley said it best, and I do agree with this, is that they waited too long to start the transition plan. They could have drafted somebody earlier. And it's always the dirty little secret about the NFL is quarterbacks of Ben Roethlisberger's stature. You saw with Matt Ryan in Atlanta, they do not like having young, highly drafted quarterbacks sitting behind them. And you referenced Alex Smith. He was comfortable with doing it. He has a good heart and a generous spirit. And so he was okay with having his successor right there in the locker room. Most big-time coaches aren't that way. Our quarterbacks aren't that way. And so that was problem number one. Problem number two was that my guess is that they would have taken a run at Jimmy Garoppolo. They would have maybe waited out the possibility of Baker Mayfield getting released in Cleveland. That Mr. Trubisky, I think they panicked. I think they saw Trubisky available, thought highly of his time with Brian Dable in Buffalo behind Josh Allen, the experience he had in Chicago playing, and thought, okay, we can make this work and we'll just draft a guy. But this team with a Jimmy Garoppolo playing, not the greatest quarterback in the world, or even a Baker Mayfield playing for them, would be much more interesting right now. Mayfield having time in the offense as opposed to going to Carolina in August when he showed up there and doing what he's doing now.
The time with Dable, and I have heard that. I'm with that was like the big thing. Oh, the reports out of Buffalo are that he's great. He's great in practice. In games where he mostly just kneeled down, he was 6 of 8 for 43 yards, no touchdowns, and 1 INT. I mean, buying who looks good in the NFL practices is like a chat board of a college team's evaluation of the scout team quarterback, right? The chat. Let me restate this. It's like buying the evaluation of the scout team's quarterback of a college team that's being set on a chat board that sucks. Because when the team sucks and has no quarterback, the scout team, wait till you see this kid. He's going to be great, right? He's a turd too because he can't start and can't get in there. It's just you're desperate for hope. Now, the Bills weren't desperate for hope. They're not a bad team. But anyone who says so-and-so looks good in practice is a farce. Like, this is a sign of a real personnel problem in Pittsburgh that Mitchell Trubisky was the plan. And why not go get Jimmy Garoppolo and Mitchell Trubisky and draft Kenny Pickett and just throw numbers at the quarterback spot, Eric?
I don't. Yeah, I mean, what if Trubisky played the best out of all those players in training camp, though? Like, that's, I guess, my worry is like, oh, what are you doing with Trubisky? It's like, well, maybe he was the best option at the time. And maybe, I don't know. Like, I do agree, like, throw more, but they took a 3rd-round pick on Mason Rudolph. They took a 1st-round pick on Pickett. They gave a modest contract to Trubisky. Like, that is kind of doing all the above, isn't it?
I think Jimmy Garoppolo is a much more accomplished quarterback than Mitchell Trubisky.
He wouldn't have been cheap, though. Like, at the time, right? Yeah. Like, at the time he had a shoulder injury for one, right? And then after that, after that it got kind of weird, didn't it? That no one wanted him.
It did, and the injury lingered on. But to me, this is one where you take a flyer. You're out from under that contract in a year. Like we talked about the Drew Brees effect. The Dolphins walked away from Drew Brees. The Saints didn't. They signed a quarterback coming off an injury, and it ended up paying huge dividends. I don't know. The Pittsburgh Steelers are such a good organization. Mike Tomlin is such a good coach. It's just staggering to me that this is where they sit right now at the quarterback position. I'm amazed.
Well, they got in trouble with that position before. They've had issues before Ben showed up. They were kind of wandering around in that wasteland trying to figure out who should be the guy, and it took about 5 or 6 years before they ended up with 7.
Speaking of the Pittsburgh Steelers, if you look down through the history of the Pittsburgh Steelers, and you'll go back to Chuck Noll, and you'll see that Chuck Noll won 4 Super Bowls for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and then things started going south. They started going south when he lost Terry Bradshaw. It wasn't immediate. It didn't fall apart. I'm looking here. After they won their 4th Super Bowl in 1979, 9-7, 8-8, 6-3 in a strike year, and made the playoffs. 10-6, won their division. 9-7, won their division in 1984. All this under Chuck Noll. 7-9, 6-10, 8-7, 5-11, 9-7. Got into the playoffs that year. It really, they gave a lot of time and waited a long time. We're very patient. 9-7 and then 7-9. Never was there that kind of success that they had in that one window. It's not been that long, but Bill Belichick, Jeff, is kind of starting to look like that. How long, if you're the New England Patriots, do you go with a 70-year-old head coach? All that fabulous success before you start evaluating him like you would any other coach that didn't have 6 championship rings with your organization.
Oh, he's not getting fired.
Not today.
I don't think it's a question of how long do you go with him. It's how long does he want to stick around and deal with it if he's not having the success he's used to. I mean, he was in Green Bay playing a Packers team with a backup quarterback that sounded like a comic book character, taking into overtime. He's still a good coach.
So should they fire the GM? Oh, wait a minute. That's Belichick.
That's Belichick too, right? Yeah. I mean, it's hard for any coach to do what he's done or to keep winning beyond their prime years. You mentioned Chuck Noll. I look at Don Shula. I look at even someone like Mike Holmgren on a lower level, the things he did in Green Bay. He took the Seahawks to a Super Bowl, but it wasn't like this. It wasn't the same level of success. I think what you're seeing Belichick go through is just a natural evolution for any great coach. Was at some point you're not going to have the dominant players anymore, and not just a Tom Brady. I mean, he's going to end up having about 10 Hall of Fame players through that 20-year run that he had, between 2001 and 2020 when Brady left. And so it's tough to keep stocking the cupboard. I don't blame him for that, but I still think he's a really good coach. It's just at some point you start making mistakes. And at some point the magic wears off. And Al Davis used to say most coaches don't deserve more than 10 years on a job because their message gets old after a while. You start losing those guys in the locker room that were your dudes, which was a big part of how he had his success. And guys come in, they don't respond to the same message, and they don't carry it in the same way to everybody else.
I'm not sticking a flag in the ground and saying Bill Belichick is going the way of Chuck Noll, but it's a distinct possibility. Like everybody loses their fastball at some point, Eric. And, I rattled off 12 seasons. The Pittsburgh Steelers stayed the course after winning their 4th Super Bowl. Terry Bradshaw played on the end of his career and then ultimately headed out. But in 12 seasons, he had one 10-win season. One 10-win season. And they went to Bill Cowher, and immediately they were a contender again year after year after year. If only there were a franchise that had an iconic Hall of Fame coach that they said, no, the losing's not too much, even in the face of massive outrage, and went with a guy who they had conviction in and maybe even wasn't popular and it had success. If there had been a story like that, maybe it'd be easier for the Patriots to, oh, wait a minute, there is. It's called the Dallas Cowboys firing Tom Landry and hiring Jimmy Johnson. Like there is a precedent of that working. You just got to have the balls to say, Bill doesn't have it anymore. I'm not saying it's today, but I would bet it's more likely to go Chuck Noll than it is he bounces back for another championship.
It's Chuck Noll rather than Don Shula, and even Don Shula, there weren't Super Bowls at the end there. Remember Landry's last year in Dallas, they were 3-13. Like we have not seen the bottom fall out of Belichick the same way, right? So I think that's a little bit of a concern with the analogy, right?
Is what?
Well, like Belichick's worst season is 7-9. When Landry got fired, that Dallas team was 3-13 with no talent.
What do you think this year's headed for?
I mean, look, the Lions will find a way to lose to them this week, so at least 2 wins.
Well, and a new owner, right, Eric? I mean, Jerry Jones came in there and said, "Okay, we're done here." I don't know who was the owner before him. Tex Schramm would have done that.
No, it was actually Tex
was Schramm the GM. Was Schramm the GM? Schramm was the owner, right?
Hang on. Before I'll look it up here. I think Tex had a lofty title, HR Bum Bright. That sound right?
If ever there was a Texas name.
Sold the team to Jerry Jones in 1989. He had purchased the Cowboys in 1984. Was
Schramm ever the owner, or am I mistaken about that?
No, Schramm was he was like team president.
Okay.
I'll see if I can find something on where the ownership changed hands a couple of times, but the owner was always in the background.
Yeah. But Steve Cashman makes a great point here about Bill Walsh. Bill Walsh did get kind of pushed out of his job with the Niners, and they elevated George Seifert. It was kind of Eddie DeBartolo was a very aggressive young owner at the time, and they wanted to keep things rolling, and Bill was kind of a little bit burned out.
Did they really?
Yeah, I think
He
it was.
won a championship.
Yeah, they won
last year.
They won the Super Bowl in '89. It was the biggest like bleep you in the history of football. Like they wanted to show Bill, like they didn't like Bill Walsh on the way out, the players especially.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. They
Wow.
won it. It was not a.
It was the Steve Young
Bill,
and Joe Montana stuff that charade he pulled. He was he was kind of an a-hole with like what's that? Clark, the '87. He was.
Can somebody what was the charade of winning championships with Montana and having Steve Young ready to take his place?
He pitted Steve Young against Montana
and won a third Super Bowl while doing it.
Right.
Bill Parcells is a hero for those kind of tactics.
Yeah. Well,
like I said, at the time, Jeff, I mean, we watched the same, like Jeff said it too, like they hated him at the end.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know.
But we're not comparing that to where Bill Belichick is right now. Certainly was a whole different vibe there, but it's just hard for a coach of that stature. Usually a coach of that stature leaves of their own accord, right? Who was the last great coach aside from Tom Landry to get his walking papers?
Joe Gibbs. To get his wife. I thought you were going to say to leave on his own terms.
No, I mean to get the F out. Like there aren't Bill. It happened with Bill Parcells. Didn't happen with, I guess Jimmy Johnson. It happened, but that was more personality conflict than it was anything else.
But didn't Jimmy Johnson not only send Tom Landry packing, he sent Don Shula packing?
Jimmy Johnson?
Yeah. Didn't he follow?
Oh, I see what you're saying. I'm saying that Jerry Jones got rid of Jimmy. It's hard to know if Jimmy Johnson left on his own or Jerry Jones said, you're gone, or if it was just a mutual agreement. But that was the one case I would think of where a great coach and owner said, hey, this ain't working out. You got to go.
Yeah. I think Don Shula was run. I mean, he was 7 and he was 8-8 his last year. Is that right? No, he was 9-7 his last year.
Yeah, it was very quiet 9-7.
Yeah, and shown the door on his way out. The Broncos took on water. Eric, Javonte Williams. They've already got the Nathaniel Hackett, which, by the way, I love the one vote for Nathaniel Hackett as coach of the year earlier. The hashtag sarcasm would have been nice to go with that one because I know it was sarcasm. But is this it without that attack? We've a lot of people are already talking about, I saw a great tweet was, Russell Wilson, is always going to be remembered as the guy who wasted Pete Carroll's prime years. I thought that was fantastic because, it's always been that somehow Pete Carroll was ruining, let Russ cook and all that kind of stuff. But like when he was effective, they pounded the rock. And Javonte Williams was one of the best young running backs in football. Now he's down. Is that it for the Broncos, Eric?
I don't think it's it. Like if Wilson improves by like 25%, they should be okay. But it's not great. Randy Gregory is a big loss. Williams is a running back. Gordon's about as good as him. Fumbles a lot, but just this offense does not look in sync. We talked about last night on Red, Gold, and Bold. It's like the places where Russ likes to throw the ball, his receivers aren't getting open, and his receivers are getting open in places where he won't throw it. And it's, I think it's endemic, and, it's going to be an issue if they figure out how to turn it around. The AFC is flatter than we thought after the Bills and the Chiefs. So they might be able to make the playoffs still.
You like the Broncos to be able to survive this one, Jeff, or is this as far as it can go?
They're a weird team, and they're the kind of team.
It's one word. Weird is one word for it.
Yeah, but they're just. There's a part of me that thinks they could just muddle along and just look very mediocre to bad at times and find a way to win 11, 10 games. And you're just looking up and saying, "Oh, this team is 7-3. How'd they get here?" And they've got that vibe to them, and a lot of it is. The quarterback is still pretty good in high-pressure situations. I was talking to a scout the other day. He made a really good point about the chemistry he had with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett in Seattle, and he hasn't really established that with Jerry Jeudy and Cortland Sutton. They are like Eric. I think Eric made the point the other day about their kind of routes those guys run successfully or effectively are not what Metcalf and Tyler Lockett did a lot of, and so there is a little bit of a disconnect in their passing game. But I do think Javonte Williams is a big loss for them because he does give them an escape clause in their offensive strategy as far as being able to say if all else fails, we can just run the rock effectively. And as Eric said, Melvin Gordon carries the football like he's been spraying WD-40 on it, before every attempt. It's just like five fumbles in 5 games is ridiculous for a running back who's going to get more carries now.
50 running back. He's not even a starter.
Yeah. So it's just you fear for that. But again, I just think they are lucky in the sense that offensive football in the NFL right now is not what it was 3 years ago. And so they are just competent enough to be able to survive when their defense is playing at a high level and their quarterback can execute in high leverage situations. But yeah, I think losing Williams is a huge loss for a team like
if
this.
the 49ers don't make the playoffs, I mean, I said that 11-10 game. I mean, what an absolute turd that thing was for the 49ers. Upcoming schedule for the Broncos: Colts at home, Thursday nighter, right? That's distinct advantage.
That's a very winnable game for them.
Very winnable game. At the Chargers, it's tough. It's tough. Jets at home.
That should be a win.
Should be a win. They're a feisty 2-2. The Jags are a feisty 2-2. They go there. At the Titans, they look like they're dead on arrival. Then home for the Raiders. Then at the Panthers.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a schedule to make a run with. I mean, if you've got anything, you should be able to come through that winning football games. I mean, what? That's 1-2. Give them a loss. Let's give them a loss to the Chargers. It's 2, 4, 6 winnable games.
Yeah, which will put them at what, 8-3?
If they would win them all. I don't think they'll win them all, but
or
if they
7-4 or whatever,
4-2 and lose to the Chargers, that would bring them. That'd get them to 6-5. They'd go one better. Yeah, they're 7-4, and they're right in the middle of all the playoff talk at that point. So, but if they're not with that schedule, fire Nathaniel Hackett. Can we agree?
Oh yeah. I wouldn't say fire him. I think he's going to get 2 years like every other coach gets. But if there's all the bumbling going on that's been happening in the first couple of games, that's all. That goes back to why that first game in Seattle was such a huge loss for them. In that you got to win those kind of games to be able to deal with the things you're going through now. And maybe they embrace winning ugly. Maybe it becomes part of their personality. But I don't know if they're ever going to win pretty. At least not this season.
Was it Cam Cameron who was fired after 1 year with the Dolphins? Just had
they were like 1-15.
Yeah, and Steve Wilkes was fired after 1 year with the Cardinals.
Yeah, same thing.
Pat Shurmur in Cleveland, I want to say. Mike Pettin in Cleveland.
It's happened. And Nathaniel Hackett is a prime candidate right now. A prime candidate right now if he doesn't start winning football games. Davante Adams missing Aaron Rodgers. Should we be shocked, Eric, that it hasn't clicked yet with his college quarterback, David Carr? I mean, is this just what we should have all expected? And certainly I know a lot of fantasy people did because he wasn't going as the number 1 wide receiver like he did in Green Bay. He tumbled way down the list. So fantasy owners saw this coming.
Yeah, the markets did too. I mean, Adams was 1,200 yards was his over-under, which seemed low to me for a guy who had been one of the best receiver in the league most of the last couple of years. Derek Carr just isn't. He's not that caliber of quarterback. So you're going to get ups and downs. I'm guessing that you're going to get a hot stretch for these two guys, but ultimately, like Derek, he's a 8-9, 7-10, 10-7 quarterback. So you're going to have lulls where like things aren't working out that well because the quarterback just ultimately limits your ceiling.
Do we look at this and say, Jeff, that Tua Tagovailoa is just a better quarterback than Derek Carr? Because Tyreek Hill is not having massive problems catching the football in Miami. We're going to see what happens, however long Tua might be out. But is that what this, Davante Adams is struggling to get traction going. He was better this past week, but is struggling to get traction going. And this is a definitive send. Like, it's not going to be good. Derek Carr signed a contract extension that in reality, he's still cheaper to cut than keep in the second year of it. So it's a 1-year extension. Adam Hill, friend of the Too Deep podcast, we've had him on and talked about it. He covers the Raiders for the Review Journal, and he said he can't believe how underreported it is nationally, the actual structure of that contract, because it really binds the Raiders to him for just 1 year. If you don't succeed after they spend a boatload of cash and draft capital to get Davante Adams, they're looking in another direction, are they not?
That's a very good chance of it, for sure. I like what Brett Roberts said. I just think he's getting better coaching in Miami, Tua, that is. And I think their strategies are a lot more sound. It's funny how great your chemistry can be when you're working on air in shorts and T-shirts in the offseason, and then people actually start game planning for you. And that same chemistry doesn't translate in the same way. And on the flip side, Aaron Rodgers doesn't see Davante Adams for months on end and then shows up and has this phenomenal chemistry. Part of what's happening with Davante Adams with the Raiders is just that Derek Carr either has to get comfortable with the idea that he's going to throw a lot of balls into double coverage, which is something he does not like to do, or he's going to have to, or they're going to have to find some ways to scheme Davante Adams open in the way that Sean McVay does Cooper Kupp, or what the Minnesota Vikings do with Justin Jefferson. It's not surprising in the sense that he's not playing with Aaron Rodgers. And look, all players in his situation feel like they're the answer, right? So wherever they go, they don't feel like I should have had Aaron Rodgers was a big part of what I did and my success. He respects him, I'm sure. He appreciates him, but he probably feels like wherever I go, I'm going to put up 112 for 1,500 and 16 touchdowns. And so I'm sure he's probably going through his own transition in the offense. They're trying to figure out how to use him effectively. I think the way they played on Sunday was what they should be doing, which is running the football a lot more and trying to find a way to bring safeties down in the box and give him more matchups. Because from everything I understand, he's seeing all kinds of double coverage every game. And again, I don't think Derek Carr is that comfortable with throwing the football into those kinds of spaces and thinking it's going to end up being a great outcome.
Is it a Josh McDaniel problem, Eric? Because Waller's not doing anything either. Anybody who took him in their fantasy league is well aware of it. He's been a complete no-show.
Yeah, I agree with what Jeff said. Like, Josh Jacobs is averaging like 4.8 yards per carry after contact. They finally went back to him a little bit. I think it takes a little pressure off of Carr, and that shows to me Josh McDaniel. Like, I was talking to Thomas Dimitroff, my new boss, about him because they're friends. I was like, you'd rather have him start 0-3 and work his way up than falsely start 6-0 and work his way back. To me, I think they showed some steps this week, getting better on offense, doing more of the smart things, and ultimately, I think that's going to help him down the stretch. Will it help him this week? I don't know.
Yeah, I think McDaniel's another guy who might get a short leash when it's all said and done with how things are going. Jeff, the Ravens blew a 17-point lead for the second time. A lot of people, myself included, picked them to win the division. Part of that because they were able to, take on a last place schedule, and it looked like things were going to be, pretty easy for them, sledding wise, and not the case, right? Right now, they've blown a couple of games. Cause for major concern here with the Ravens?
I wouldn't say major concern, but certainly concern. I was out at their training camp when Eric was out there in August, and there was a lot of optimism about their secondary, getting Marcus Peters back and Marlon Humphreys back and signing Marcus Williams and drafting Kyle Hamilton. But, they're still struggling with the same issues there, which is they don't really have a definitive pass rush. They're doing a lot of things in their secondary to try to make them that strength, and they're having communication issues. And it's not the same defense. They don't have a lot of within that front seven, the kind of dominant players that they've had in their heydays, when they had the Ray Lewises and the Terrell Suggses. Calais Campbell's like 50 years old now. They're still using Justin Houston, using players who've been around forever. And so you're not really seeing them be as, what's that, Eric?
Jason Pierre-Paul.
Yeah, Jason Pierre-Paul. Yeah, I mean, like, they're literally, if you were if you're close to AARP age, they're going to sign you with the Ravens to rush the passer. And maybe that changes when David Ojabo gets healthy and Jason Oweh gets a little more skilled. But right now, it's just I never thought I would say Ravens defense would leave up 2 17-point leads in the same season, let alone the same tenure of a John Harbaugh. And not kicking that field goal the other day late in that game was an indictment of that. It was a perfect statement about how they feel about their defense's ability to stop people. And so, yeah, I wasn't that high on them going into the year because I felt like the Bengals were just a better team. But right now, I'm definitely concerned about them.
Eric?
Yeah, the year they went 14-2, they started out 2-2. I want to say one loss, they gave up a ton of points to the Chiefs in 19, and then they gave up like 40 and lost by multiple scores to the Browns, I think in week 4 of that year. Obviously there are reasons why this, Ravens defense isn't the best. And, you listed them off, Jeff. I think Lamar, if he continues to play the way he does, you're going to get some variance on the defensive side of the ball. And I think the team's going to be fine. In fact, this weekend's game, Bengals, Baltimore, 2-2 teams. I think 2-2 team's a good team. I think one of them's a bad team. I think the Bengals are the bad team.
You mentioned that 14-2 year. They did start 2-2, 2-0, then dropped 2. They lost 33-28 at Kansas City, lost 40-25 to the Browns, and then went on to win every game the rest of the way. Defensive performance in that win streak. This is how many points they allowed: 23, 17, 16, 20, 13, 7, 6, 17, 17, 21, 15, and 10. Never allowed more than 23. That was in an overtime game to the Steelers. After that, they never allowed more than 21. There was a 23, 21, and 20. Everything else was in the teens or single digits. That's not what this defense is, though, right? Like, I mean, there are some misses. Like, has the draft fountain at the Baltimore Ravens been? I mean, Jeff, to your point about taking all those veteran guys, is it because they're not drafting the way they used to?
Yeah. And that team had Matthew Judon, who was a Pro Bowl level pass rusher, and he was having a great season in that 14-2 year. And so there were other players on that Pro Bowl who were Pro Bowl level on that squad. But yeah, I mean, they've always drafted well, but it's hard to, somebody made the point here. I think Donovan Weber, it's hard to develop pass rushers today. As much as we talk about finding them, it's much harder to find guys coming out of college who are really skilled at that craft. Partly because what they do in college now is just take great athletes and just go up against a really fat offensive tackle and beat them. So they're not learning moves. They're not learning how to set things up. And when they get into the NFL, they really have to learn. It's not just about being the better athlete. It's about really understanding leverage and how to use your hands and how to set people up. And that takes some time now. And you really think about it. You can probably count on one hand the number of really dominant pass rushers there are in the NFL right now. And you got a lot of guys who are trying to learn how to do it. Daniil Hunter in Minnesota is a pretty good example of that. A guy who in college didn't have great production, and then all of a sudden he figured it out in the NFL. It's hard to get it, and it's partly why they are where they are.
Eric, you've said it for a while about like when you can't, if you don't have one of those premium picks, you can't get one of those premium guys. That's kind of true of left tackle as well. I mean, is this just the NFL at work, dragging everybody back to the middle?
Yeah. Edge players. I mean, it's pretty easy, right? You have good athleticism and they're, 40 broad jump, that kind of, 3-cone stuff. And whether you're productive in college. And as Jeff said, I think you can have the athleticism without the production and learn. That's still a long shot. But if you don't have both.
That's why the number one pick was the number one pick this year for the Jaguars, right?
Yeah.
Yes, but I would rather take Daniil Hunter in round 3 than pick 1-1. That was, but yes, the issue is like you have to have both to be productive right away. And if you're not productive right away, then you run into the Brian Burns, the Rashawn Gary, all that issue where you get 1 or 2 years of brilliant play, and it's almost like that. And then you have to buy into that in the secondary market, which is more expensive, and you're buying into less years of certainty there. So it's a tough position for sure, especially when you're picking from 15 to 32.
What do you expect them to get on a roll, Jeff? The Ravens?
I am not as optimistic as Eric is, just because if they don't win this game this week, I think it's ominous for them. And I like the Bengals this week. To be honest with you, I think the Bengals, obviously had their number last year when they had a bunch of injuries, but I don't think it's a great matchup for them in terms of the way they're covering people, the way they're communicating on the back end. When you have three receivers like the Bengals have, and tight end's pretty good, quarterback's good, I think you can create a lot of matchups that are good for you without being pressured in the way that's going to offset your offense. So, look, the AFC is not as impressive as we thought it was going to be, but it certainly is still very competitive. And if you are going to give up 17-point leads on a routine basis, yeah, it's hard for me to get behind you right now.
Next four, I mean, it would have been nice to put the Bills in the win column for them, because Bengals at home, at the Giants, playing much better. We'll get to them in a minute. Browns at home, and then a short week on a Thursday night going to Tampa to take on the Bucs. That's not an easy schedule to get things turned around. Marcus Peters went after, reportedly was going after John Harbaugh and had to be held back. Is that a cancer you have to rid yourself of? I don't think it's a coincidence. It may be a coincidence, but the Chiefs got out from under him and they won a Super Bowl. I mean, I'm not saying that's, point one to point two, like cause and effect there, but is his attitude and all the shenanigans and all the BS that comes with him just too much for a team to handle, Jeff?
Well, I mean, I'm kind of have mixed opinions about this. You don't want to see that happen. But I also feel like everything I've heard about him in Baltimore is that he's been a good soldier for the last, whatever, it's been 3 years since he's been there. The kind of guy who's taken the DBs out to dinner and being a model citizen, a stand-up dude. And so, I mean, he's an emotional guy. I understand in that moment why you'd be upset. You got to handle it better. He wasn't in the right to be in his coach's face like that. And I didn't see the actual video of it, so I don't know exactly how it looked and how it compared to Mahomes and Bieniemy and that kind of thing a couple of weeks ago with the Colts and Chiefs. But I'm not as put off by it, because I think if it was a bigger thing, you'd hear more about it. But I also feel like, I think he's grown up a little bit more than we're giving him credit for.
That's interesting. I don't know how it's going. I know, been out to Baltimore a number of times. I trust your read on the situation there in Baltimore, because I know what I saw in Kansas City, and it was a titanic.
Oh, it was different.
It was a titanic pain in the ass for the franchise. All right, let's talk about some of those turnaround teams. Jacksonville. 5 of the teams you pointed this out, Jeff, that picked in the top 10 are now 2-2 or better. The Jacksonville Jaguars, who picked 1, and they also had the 27th pick in Devin Lloyd, but Trayvon Walker at number 1. The Jets took Sauce Gardner at 4 and Garrett Wilson, the wideout, at 10. Giants also had 2 top 10 picks, Kayvon Thibodeau at 5, Evan Neal at 7. The Falcons at 8 took Drake London. The Seahawks at 9 took Charles Cross. The Jaguars did a lot. We've kind of detailed. They did a lot in free agency, had a lot of cap room. They poured a lot into it. There's also, what do we got? A first-year head coach in Peterson, second-year head coach with the Jets, first year with the Giants, second year with the Falcons, and then, of course, Pete Carroll there. What's the common thread, and which one's the most likely to be the real deal, Jeff?
I mean, the Jaguars to me are the obvious one, because I think they're really well coached. The coaches won a Super Bowl. They've always played fast on defense, even when Urban Meyer was there. The quarterback's coming around, but I would take them. But Atlanta to me is a very impressive story. They'd be 1A, because to me I don't think anybody in these windows right here was picking Atlanta to be anything more than the 30 or 31st best team in the NFL this year. And for them to be 2-2, potentially being 4-0 if things broke right, they don't blow a big lead at the start of the year, and they were able to make a comeback against the Rams, they could easily be undefeated. I have a lot of respect for Arthur Smith as an offensive coordinator. What he's doing with that offense, as far as running the football, as far as being creative with Mariota, the play action passing. It's impressive because they don't have a ton of talent, and they're pretty feisty.
Which one's impressive for you, Eric? You, by the way, we put it up on the screen for those that are catching us via the podcast. If you're part of the stream, you can be part of the conversation on Facebook, Twitch, and YouTube. Credit being given, Eric Eager of the Jacksonville Jaguars in the playoffs. Still a long way to go, but pretty strong with that prediction right now. Are the Jags the most impressive, or the Falcons? Who are you most impressed by?
To me, it's the Falcons, and this is the reason. The Falcons had one of the worst offensive lines in football for years, and now they're basically that's their edge right now, is that they have such a great front five on offense. Arthur Smith, it took a year for all the zone stuff and his offense, but like, it's hard to lose when you win at the line of scrimmage like that, especially against bad defenses like Cleveland and the previous week against Seattle.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm pretty impressed by what the Giants have done, because I'm not a Daniel Jones guy. I give credit, and maybe it's I'm a fan, of
Brian Dable.
Yeah, I called him Bucket Hat for so many years. After his brief tenure here in Kansas City, where every day he wore a bucket hat. But yes, Brian Dable, who
bucket hat.
Yeah, he wore a bucket hat every day. When he was the Chiefs offensive coordinator for a year, and he wore it a lot.
How about that staff, by the way? Nick Sirianni.
Yes.
Also,
yeah. Todd
best coaches weren't. The head coach was the worst coach.
Yeah, I'll have to go back and look at the at that coaching staff and see if there's any other ones that are on it. I am a fan of his. I think he's a good coach, and I think if you're having that kind of success with a guy that most people are saying he's going to be out the door, I like what Brian Dable's done. I mean, I think that's a hell of an operation there for him. Let's wrap up with this. What are you looking for in week 5, Eric? Do you want to take first crack at this?
If the Dallas Cowboys can go to LA with Micah Parsons, aka Lawrence Taylor, rush against that LA Rams offense and get their 4th straight win with Cooper Rush, the narratives are going to be amazing, aren't they? That's the game. I want to see the Rams lose to the Dallas Cowboys.
Rams and Cowboys. Jeff, what are you looking for?
I will go Vikings and Bears, just because I don't know what the Minnesota Vikings are right now. I'm getting on a plane tomorrow night and going up there to spend some time with them this weekend. Eric probably knows better than me, being the resident Vikings hater, but they could be a 4-1 team that can't get the ball consistently to their receiver, the best receiver in football, who can't get one of the best running backs in football going on a regular basis, with a quarterback who Eric can't stand. They can't do anything, but they could really be a 4-1 team and really be in prime position to make a move in the second half.
It's honestly, and Kwesi and I are friends, so it's kind of weird, but
Kwesi, the general manager,
the general manager of the Vikings, he said, basically, he's making the gamble that this would be kind of a weak NFC, that the quarterback, the veterans they have, Harrison Smith, Adam Thielen, obviously Kirk Cousins, that they could just lay the ball up on the green and win this year. And that so far, as Jeff said, they could be 4-1 and not be a good football team. So that I give Kwesi credit for having that foreshadowing.
Yeah. Listen, I think this is a great weekend with a lot of storylines. We know the first storylines for me is the Eagles and Cardinals. Because I will be on the Cardinals. If anyone caught our Red, Gold, and Bold Chiefs podcast last night, I don't know how we got clear out to there, but I do like the Cardinals plus the 5 against the Eagles. So I am looking at that, but I want to come up with something new here for today. So Chargers Browns, right? Eager didn't get on the warpath against Justin Herbert, but if the Chargers are going to be something, they have to go win.
I don't know. The funny thing is that the Chargers get a 10-point lead. Are you going to be able to tell the difference between Herbert and Brissett for the next quarter and a half?
Well, that's
my guy turns into Brissett when they have a lead.
But but that's my point. I mean, like the Browns are a team that the roster's pretty good. That they kind of show some fire. But if you're the Chargers, if you're going to be a Super Bowl team, which they were the third favorite out of the AFC, and I think they're the fifth favorite overall to win the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Like play like it at some point. Play like it at some point.
Yeah.
And I'm in total agreement with this statement right here. Browns +3 is the play. Chargers going to charge it. That's my expectation. Yes, is that the Browns this will be the game, and everyone will be going like, "What's going on with the Chargers?" And Eric Eager's head will explode next week, live on this podcast. All right, that's going to do it for Jeff Chadiha from the NFL Network, Eric Eager for Sumer Sports. My name is Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHP. Again, if you catch us on the podcast, we appreciate it. You can also be a part of the conversation with the live stream. We do it Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. Central. Just make sure you're following all of us, and you'll see it. We'll get the reminder for you. Then until we talk again next Wednesday, thank you very much for joining us here on Too Deep.